Okay, so the new chapter of Deltarune is about to release, and I know for a fact that it's going to destroy every theory ever, and I'm kicking myself for not being able to make any sort of long form video content whatsoever. So I'm just jotting down my theories now, not even because I want to share them with the world, but just because I want to be sure that if I'm actually right, I have evidence to say that I've said this before the chapters were released. So these are my theories about the knight specifically, and the unused voice in the code. Uh, I get the feeling that as soon as chapter 5 will come out, we'll actually know who the knight is, or at least a lot of the ideas that people have around the knight will be totally destroyed. So I need to get this out before chapter 5 releases. I don't even know how I'm going to edit this video. I think I'm just gonna throw some stuff at the screen and hope that that works. Uh, but anyway, so I think, and hear me out because this is a hot take here, I think the night might be December holiday. Yes, I know, shocker. So, but I do have a more specific idea of it because, like, if this is the night, then what does it mean to find her? Well, my idea of it is that Des is indeed stuck deep in the darkness, and from her position, she can influence the other dark worlds, because she is stuck in a place that's very close to the source of the darkness. So, whenever someone creates a dark world, they're channeling darkness from around her, which means that her influence can be felt in that channeled darkness. And the night is actually more like a darkness puppet that she can control remotely. So she's not actually inside the night. The night is just a blob of darkness that is vaguely in the shape of a humanoid figure with antlers that she's controlling from deep down in the darkness. Now, why do I think that? Well, first of all, there is that scene of her pressing her hand against Chris's in chapter 4, that one when you try to backtrack. I feel like that feels like saying that she can influence the darkness. You might say that that's just the night directly, but there's a few other things that make me think that. Uh, for example, there is the whole Raise Up Your Bat is a very Des-coded song, and it references Don't Forget with saying that Des is with us in the dark. It feels like her being inside the entire darkness is made explicit in a song like in places like Don't Forget and Raise Up Your Bat. And another really important thing, which is one of the reasons why I think the night is more like a being of darkness than an actual person with an armor, is that Ralsei, when he explains the roaring, one of the drawings that we see depict the Titans, which looks suspiciously like the roaring knight. So that gives me the idea that the knight is a being that is a lot more closely related to darkness than what would be the case if it was just a normal person channeling darkness. I mean, we see them shapeshift and stuff. That means that they're very closely related to the darkness of the dark worlds. This gives, for example, new meaning to Carol wanting to find Des, because even though Carol can interact with the night almost directly through Chris, just having the knight in front of you does not mean that you can get to find Des, because she's lost very deep in the code. On that note, if this is true, I do believe that it's possible for two knights to be on screen at once. Because if they're just puppets of darkness, you just grab more darkness, shape it like a roaring knight, and you're good to go. Then Des can control both of them remotely instead of just one. That also matches up with the drawing in Ralsei's explanation in the Roaring, because we see two of those knight-looking titans in it instead of just one. So if there is one takeaway that I would like you to get from all of this, is that we might see two roaring knights on screen at once, and I would like to say that I called it, in case this actually happens. And while I'm at it, the knight feels like such a weird character in terms of motivation and modus operandi that I don't really think that they're just a person looking for death like the Rudy Knighters and Carol Knighters like to believe. They feel like someone who is fulfilling a specific niche in the characters of Deltarune, and they feel like they have very specific plans in mind. Like, I don't know, someone who is so closely related to darkness and the prophecy that they literally look like a titan and might be a variation of a titan does not mesh well with the idea of someone who is desperately trying to even understand the prophecy in order to find a loved one they lost. In fact, speaking of which, I do like to believe that Des is carrying out all of these things for one specific reason. Now, I will admit my faults and say that I don't know what this exact reason is. It definitely has to do with fulfilling the prophecy, but I cannot get any more specific than this. I'm saying this because I like the idea of Des having agency in the plot. I would not want her to just be standing there waiting to be saved. I like the idea that she has her own specific plans and her own specific vision in mind for what to do. And I'm assuming that this vision is morally grey, but that there is still a reason behind it that we still don't know and that we will find out soon. But this calls to mind another question. Wait, how can Des know what she's doing and control the darkness like she did in Chapter 4 with a hand pressed against towers? How can she be so aware of everything around this topic if the unused lines in the code feel so lost and confused? If the unused lines in the code don't even seem to imply that who the person speaking through them is so unaware of where they even are, let alone what to do about it. Like, that's not behavior of someone who has a plan. That's behavior of someone who's found themselves in a situation that they don't know how to process. Someone who's lost. And I've got an answer for that. It's because the unused lines in the code are not this. They're as real. Yes, I'm one of those people. So I have a few reasons for believing this. The least notable one is that, okay, so the Prince of the Dark Prophecy panel looks really suspicious to me. Why is Ralsei cloaked? Why is Ralsei cloaked in the intro cutscene when the legend plays in Chapter 1? And why is Ralsei cloaked in the prophecy? He stays cloaked for a total of 5 minutes. Now, you could see him getting uncloaked so earlier as a metaphor for him opening up way more than was expected of him in the prophecy, in large part because of Susie's presence there, but it still feels really weird that his entire appearance is hidden. Now, to be fair, we know a few more things about the Prince of the Prophecy, such as that he has horns, but it still comes across as weird that his appearance would be hidden this way. But if the Prince of the Prophecy turns out to be Asriel and not Ralsei, then suddenly it makes sense. Asriel also has horns. He would also probably have fire-based attacks, because those are things Ralsei inherits from the Dreamers in Undertale. And the moniker of Prince Alone in Deepest Dark would still hold if it was about Asriel being stuck inside the darkness, like I just said. But another, more important reason why I believe all of this has to do with Hometown being closed off. Now, I'm very happy to see that more people are paying attention to this lately, but it's really weird how many things about the communication between Hometown and the outside world have been interrupted. The main one is the internet outage that is currently going on, but it's not the only one. It seems like outside of the internet outage, Chris cannot communicate with Asriel at all, which seems to suggest that either phone data has never worked in Hometown or cannot work right now either. Not only that, but Tenna comments on always showing reruns since a little recently, and that's just not something that happens to an old TV. It will keep showing the same programs as before, which would not be reruns. And you might say that that's just a metaphor for programs getting old as well and running out of style, but then that doesn't explain why Tenna says that it only happened since a little while recently. And there's more to this too. The Boom family says that condolences to Gerson only stopped recently. The door on the left of Hometown, which seems to be the way out, is closed off. It feels like Hometown is getting artificially closed off. And I don't know exactly why, but I do know that this prevents us from communicating with Asriel and seeing what's up with him. Sure, Asriel is supposed to be in college, but if him getting lost in the dark happened recently enough that communication with Hometown stopped just as it happened or right before that, then we would be none the wiser if he were in the darkness. I feel like Asriel has been teased quite a bit in Deltarune up until now, and so I'm kind of in the mind that it might be anticlimactic if he just appeared in Chapter 5 with no fanfare and ended up simply staying there. At the same time, he's still an Undertale character, he's had his time in the limelight, so I wouldn't want him to be an active participant to the story. And I feel like saying that he got lost in the darkness in a similar way to Des, but much more recently and with much less idea of what's even going on, creates a perfect balance between these two needs in terms of the storytelling around his character. In fact, even though we know that Des got lost in the darkness and we know the gist about the Dark Worlds and everything, we still don't know why exactly this whole conspiracy or prophecy is taking place now of all times. It might have to do with Asriel himself. Who knows? Maybe the fact that he fell into the darkness finally gave Carol the clue she needed to figure out what happened to Des, and that's why the events of Deltarune are only happening now. Now, I'll admit that my theory is not without flaw. There are a few things that don't match up, namely, so if the night is a being of pure darkness, how are they able to carry Undyne inside the light world? And if the knight is a puppet controlled from down below, why does Chris imagine their helmet coming off? Now, for the first point, I think it might have something to do with the specific nature of the black shard, since those kinds of things seem to remain identical in the light world. But either way, both of these questions are very fuzzy. I cannot really give an answer to those, and therefore this means that all my theories are wrong. Goodbye. But jokes aside, I do think there are still points to be made here about the things that I said, and even if I'm not entirely correct about everything, I think that it's possible for a lot of my ideas to present themselves in some form or another in a new chapter. Anyway, yeah, this is my theory. This is the night, but in the sense that she's lost very deep inside the darkness as she's controlling the night like a darkness puppet. Asriel is the unused voice in the code, and if you don't believe any of this, at least believe that we'll see two nights on screen at once. Alright, thank you, bye!